So this is the 100th video, guys. Well, kind of technically the 101st video. 101st? Neither of those sounds right. And also kind of technically the 99th video, depending on how you're tallying. It's literally video number 101 on my channel, but that's because there's a 40-second update video I made a while back because my power was out and I wanted to let people know that I'd be missing uploads. So that's not a real video and it doesn't quite count. But also another one of those videos is the channel opener, and you know that's kind of another video that doesn't quite count. So it's kind of like 99 true videos. But if we are just going by produced videos where I actually spent time making them, then this will be 100. And I was faced with a bit of a conundrum in doing this. It's kind of a special one. Whereas every other milestone has entirely been thanks to you guys, watching, sharing, liking, commenting. This one's all stuff I did. I doubt I'd have the drive to have made over 100 videos in 1 year without this amazing community at my back, but it's still a different kind of milestone. And a different kind of milestone requires a different kind of video. So, you guys know how I always say that I wanted to do YouTube for years and there were multiple times I tried to start and actually got a ways into producing the video? Well, I thought it'd be fun for the 100th video special to take the very first attempt I ever made at YouTube and finally finish producing it. I was horribly mistaken. Let me be clear here. I started this video back in either late 2016 or early 2017, right after I got back into collecting and probably before I was prepared to criticize this stuff. In order to make this video, I am only using the materials I originally created for that first attempt. An attempt that was so horribly laid out that it demoralized me from starting YouTube for another 4 years. Everything I did was so dumb and backwards that it was actual torture to put this together. For starters, the way I make videos currently is to record the audio one page at a time. I read a page, practice it, record it, rinse and repeat for each page. Then I go in and cut out all the flubs after recording the whole thing. The problem is that I thought I'd be clever here and remove the need to cut out the flubs by utilizing the same process for every single sentence, resulting in over 60 individual audio clips. And then I didn't number the lines. I named them each the sentences they were. If I flubbed a line, I just delete the recording of that one sentence and then record it again. Oh my god, you guys, that notion was so ill-conceived, so bafflingly stupid, I gotta explain it, because there are layers to why that was an awful idea. For starters, since I didn't number them and just labeled them, the computer alphabetized the clips. Also, the program I was recording in did not store the date and time information, meaning that there was no way to sort them by when they were created. So, in order to make this video, I had to go in and manually organize the audio by reading through the script, which I wrote in Notepad for some ungodly reason, using basically no formatting, so I could locate where each individual clip went and layer it into the timeline by hand. Oh, but it doesn't stop there, because recording it that way completely and utterly destroyed any and all dialogue flow. I already can't read a script, but back then I was even worse at it, and I was stopping between every sentence for minutes at a time so I couldn't get into any kind of rhythm. It completely robs me of most of my ability to inflect on a sentence. And the few times I do, it comes off so forced it's cringy. Then there's the fact that while this was intended to decrease my workload for editing by allowing me to not deal with cutting out flub lines, it actually more than quintupled my editing, because I had to cut off the beginning and tail end segments of each clip because there was always dead air between each segment. And even though that was the goal, it completely failed at reducing the number of flubs I did because I was so bad at reading the script. At points in this video, you will be able to hear me squinting as I try to understand what I'm reading for lines I wrote. And never mind the fact that I was not comfortable using a microphone yet, so even though it was the same mic I used for most of my videos, it sounds awful because I was afraid of bottoming out the sound, so I was saying every last line under my breath directly into it while it sat in a box full of noise-deadening foam because I also didn't understand that it would sound fine without that. Then there's the video quality. I wanted my videos to be very do-it-yourself without spending much money on the setup, so it's shot inside of a cardboard box with white gloss cardstock surrounding it and illuminated by a $10 LED strip that was failing and honestly gave it kind of a cool look with a partially purple light. I also was just filming with a phone that I had gotten only weeks prior and didn't understand how to use, and I mostly only ended up taking pictures. Lastly, I wasn't writing dialogue how I actually talk like I do in my normal videos. Instead, I was trying to create like this persona that was like, I'm right, you're wrong, in your face, and I was trying to emulate other reviewers. It was awful, and you guys are in for a rough video. In this video, you guys are going to get to see the origins of some of the stuff I do now, and you're also going to see some of the things that I always wanted to do, but for one reason or another never actually ended up doing. Like talking about transformation highlights and size comparisons. Also, the very beginning is how I always envisioned my opening segments. But originally I did use an old account name that is not what the channel ended up being, so that part is the one piece of this I changed. Anyways, at 1,200 words of explanation for what you are about to see, I think I've wasted enough of your times. So, it's about time I just showed you. Steel yourselves, as it's time for the very first prototype episode of Perspective End. Hello everyone, I'm
PerspectiveEnd,
and this is something I paid money for. Let's take a look at both modes Grimlock here brings to the table. At first glance, both modes look absolutely fantastic. He, however, has this very odd off G1 aesthetic. In robot mode, his shoulders are too high, he has busy mechanical detailing covering him, and strange additions all over. The clear intent being to prevent him from looking too plain. His dyno mode is almost more noticeably changed. He is absolutely covered head to toe in sculpted rivets and bolts, and his arms are significantly longer as well as a different shape to their show counterparts. Though this is a change I can get behind. I would also have liked to see more show-accurate arms included as an accessory. He is also noticeably featuring a more rounded body closer to an actual dinosaur's, as the original Grimlock was all flat panels and hard angles. For the diehard Jeep 1 purist in me, this is a hard pill to swallow, but the overall result does look quite nice. And the only real problem I find visually is in the robot shoulders and the dyno mode head. The robot shoulders are huge and are supposed to make him look strong, but ultimately I find it just dirties up his silhouette and takes him further from the show model than I want to go. And the dynamo head is really just too smooth and rounded for me. It doesn't look bad, but it's just more of a departure than I'd like with a masterpiece figure. Though I still have to admit that the overall look of both modes is great. Speaking of head sculpts and continuing on with the dyno mode head just a little more, the dyno mode gets the main themes right, but the execution is a bit off. I have no idea where these weird cheek diamonds come from. The original toy had an octagon there, and they're not from the original animation model. His teeth are not flush with his face and are chromed, further differentiating them from his head. Clearly a separate piece rather than the metal chompers that were built into his face in the show. I can't tell if this is either a case of them feeling like they had to include more detail to justify the price, or it's just the designers trying to create a more realistic appearance. Finger quotes as physically hard as possible around the word realistic. Now, as for the robot head, look, I'm a G1 purist, and there is just no getting around it. That is not Grimlock's face. And I love it so much because it's absolutely 100% Grimlock's face. Let me explain. Grimlock's face is that he has no face, and his no face looks very angry. And this sculpt strikes that description square in the face. And oh my god, that chromed visor. Oh my god, that chromed visor. Oh my god, that chromed visor. It is a thing of pure beauty. I'm about to say something that's probably very unpopular, but I hate light piping. It looks good 0.1% of the time when you're staring directly into a light and obscuring the rest of the face with shadow, and it looks like a lifeless pile of crap the rest of the time. If I had my way, this should be the standard going forward into all future figures. It looks great in shadow. It looks better in the light. It's always so sexy, and I love it. And unlike light piping, it can switch between cartoon accurate and comic accurate with the flip of a switch. Now, you should probably already know what side of the fence I sit on when it comes to the coloration of eyes based on how much I've talked about the G1 cartoon so far, but even I have tons of fun with this feature. Giving him red eyes for a battle mode is always a win in my book. Now, unfortunately, I have to talk about the rest of this figure. Yeah, kind of gives away my thoughts on the figure as a whole a bit prematurely, doesn't it? Sadly, it's a game of tolerances with Grimlock here, and Grimlock, he's not good at this game. Grimlock, at least with my copy of the figure, is awful on both ends of the poor tolerance spectrum. His joints are either terrifyingly tight or worthlessly loose. Of particular note, the ratchets in his knees are insane, to the point where it feels like the plastic is going to shatter before they bend. I've handed this figure off to several people with the instructions to bend his knees, and every single one of them has given up after the first ratchet click engage on the grounds that they aren't going to be the ones to break my stuff. Hear that? Hear the plastic flexing? Hear me inadvertently straining to get it to go? I swear on my life, without exaggeration, that click is bottoming out the mic and causing it to sound significantly quieter than it does in real life. After that, both his dino arms and dino fingers have no hold whatsoever. There is almost no posing them unless you get lucky. His right arm pops off at the shoulder with no provocation. One of his wrist spikes / dino toes is so stiff that when I got him out of the box, I thought they didn't bend at all. One of his heels flops all over the place, and his leg joints just won't hold a pose. But wait, it's not all sunshine and roses with old Grimlock here. Have you seen his fists? I've seen $3 Chinese knockoffs that had better fists. His left fist can look acceptable given the right angle and the right pose, but the right one is just a disgraceful block of nothing with a ball-jointed thumb that's something between a fillet and a sheet of paper. But to discuss why he's like this, we must first talk about the accessories! Grimlock here comes packaged with his crown, his gun, and his sword. Oddly enough, everyone seems to dislike the gun the most out of the three. We'll come back around to that in a moment, because you see, first I have to explain to you why Grimlock's right fist is a turgid piece of crap. It has an LED seated at the base of the fist hole in order to allow the light up gimmick in the weapons. The sword's blade lights up, as do both barrels of the gun, thanks to this gimmick. And while most people think the sword looks significantly better with this feature, they are wrong. This looks weak as hell no matter how you slice it. But I also figured out that they are just looking at the gun from the wrong angle. When viewed from the correct angle, the gun actually looks fairly kick-ass. Too bad the gimmick isn't worth the awful fists. Speaking of fists and terrible joints, let's talk posability on this Dinobotic powerhouse. Powerhouse as in the character, not the toy, because the posability is anything but any of that. Eschewing the normal review style where I show off the posability, I'm going to try something a little different and just rate the joints, only talking about the most important information of each part. The head may be the best joint on the whole figure. He can definitely glower down menacingly on smaller bots, but a head tilt is sorely missing on this guy, and don't test to see what you can get out of it. His head is on a horrifically skinny peg, and there is no doubt in my mind that you could easily break his head off, attempt to get the puppy dog look out of Grimlock. It gets an 8 out of 10. Moving down, his shoulders have to be the most inexcusably limited part of the whole figure. You'd think this is Grimlock, so of course you can assume a punching pose, but you'd be wrong for the most part. His arms pop off with little provocation. To be frank, they are so depressingly limited, he can barely get into an A stance. 3 out of 10, these are barely better than the ones off the G1 toys. After that disappointment, things are looking slightly up with a bicep joint that allows for 170 degrees of twist and 2 whole elbow joints that accomplish the task of 1 whole elbow joint. 6 out of 10, the fact that the bicep joint doesn't let the arm spin free and the double elbow only achieves a 90-degree bend means that this is an oddly average arm with above average number of joints. He has pointable dino toes, which have more utility in robot mode than they do in dino mode. I should probably talk about the posability of dino mode, but I'm not gonna. He's got like 5 total poses like that. I'm just gonna show you pictures. Question mark out of 10 for the claws. They sure do move, and they can help with poses, maybe. Both fists can spin 360, both fists have fillet of fish thumbs on ball joints that let them go places, and one of the fists has a knuckle joint with a separate trigger finger to simulate pulling a trigger, and nothing else. I'm not going to beat around the bush. I hate these fists. I'm going to give him a 1, even though they deserve like a 2. He's got no ab crunch unless you get stupid. Spins at the waist maybe 10 degrees of rotation. For some reason, Grimlock is a better high kicker than he is a puncher. Can he do the can-can? Yes, he can. Splits so hard he could hit the high notes, and a thigh cut for 360 degrees of spin. The groinal region gets an 8 out of 10. You can also simulate Grimlock being bow-legged if you please, or you could pretend that there was some dude bad enough to break Grimlock's knees. Unicron's wildest dreams. You can also double down on your sick fantasy of Grimlock suffering a crippling leg injury by bending his knees backwards on his nightmarish knee joints with 6 whole detensive forward and back. However, you only have access to the last 2 by moving his tail out of the way. Unfortunately, the friction of his legs here is too weak and it doesn't really hold a pose. It's kind of a good thing his legs have no die-cast in them. No, it's not. 5 out of 10. Finally, he has a somewhat useless tilting foot that really could have stood to be die-cast to give him a bit more stability. For a guy with feet this big, he falls over more than characters with toothpicks for feet. 2 out of 10. You know, honestly, I wanted to cut out more of the talking in that section, but every single joint on this guy is so remarkable in one way or the other, more likely the other, that I couldn't justify not saying as much as I did. I'm gonna have to work on that in later reviews. Grimlock's posing is, shall we say, lacking, to be polite. And that all stems from what I believe should be the most filthy word in all of Transformers collecting. Toy loyalty. The most crushing problems that this figure suffers from can all be traced back to one thing, and that's toy loyalty. For those not in the know, toy loyalty is the practice whereby modern figures have design elements incorporated from toys that were designed in the 70s before CAD softwares existed because, well, stupid people like stupid things. And yes, that is insulting. If you like toy loyalty, I'm insulting you. If you want your childhood toys again, buy re-releases. Don't ask that they ruin new figures with outdated ideas. Make no mistake, it is near always a terrible idea that compromises a toy unless somehow the original figure did it perfectly, as in there is no new designs that they could think of. No better way to achieve what they needed to happen. Toy loyalty always leads to worse toys. Funny thing is, I never actually owned the original Grimlock toy, but as soon as I got this figure in hand, I could see all the parts of him that were almost 50 years old. For all of 6 seconds, I was sat there thinking to myself, wait, why would they do this so more? Oh. Let me be clear, Grimlock's shoulders are terrible because of toy loyalty. Grimlock's waist is terrible because of toy loyalty. Grimlock falls in half all the time when you handle him because of toy loyalty. In order to see what I'm talking about, we have to run through the transformation. We'll be going to robot to dino, just how he's packaged, kids. Grab a notebook and tag along. Stage 1, about as obvious as it gets, flip away the fists. Stage 2, break Grimlock's knees, for science. Stage 3, flip out Grimlock's heels and rotate his legs around. Stage 4, grab the chromed bit of the tail and flip it out. Then flip out the tail tip. There's a little notch in it for easy flipitude. Stage 5, stick your fingers in this part of his leg, then lift up and flip out the rest of the tail. Stage 6, give Grimlock narrow hips. Stage 7, combine the legs by flipping them around on the inside joints. Stage 8, initiate cancer. Now, to be fair, this bit isn't on the original toy, it's just here to allow the bit of the transformation that is from the original toy. Grab anywhere below his waist and pull down. And here it is, folks, the moment you've all been waiting for. Grab his torso and hinge it down to form the dino's groin. This one step of the transformation is so bafflingly stupid, it honestly hurts me. I can't even really understand why it was on the original toy, let alone this one. Rather than have the backpack move up to form the upper torso of the dino mode, they had this convoluted, compromising system where you move the mass of the toy down to get it out of the way of the backpack. It's so over-engineered, it's so dumb. This one design choice practically ruins the entire end product. His shoulders are on a complicated swinging joint for this. He falls in half all the time for this. And the hips barely rotate for this. It's just so aggravating because it would have been so easy to have the backpack simply move on its own. Why does the whole figure have to move around the backpack instead of the other way around? All this mass shifting does is ruin joints for the express purpose of including a 50-year-old design element. I'm going to move on for now. I'll probably come back to it. The transformation honestly ends on an odd note after that. You'd think that to finish this off, you'd close up the chest and flip down the head, but you can't do it in that order because the giant locking tab on the neck has no earthly way of getting through the closed chest. So instead you have to do it in the reverse of that. Flip down the head and close up the chest. Now, on a more positive note, I'm one to say that most every transformation has a highlight, a part where the transformation feels particularly clever and fun to do, and this one is no exception. The bits involving the tail folding in and out of the legs, especially going into robot mode, are most definitely the highlight and are legitimate fun. And you can do some goofy stuff to the figure if you mess around with the transformation. Behold, the Grimlock. That admittedly enjoyable joking aside, this figure does have its high points. Unfortunately, it's just got such inescapable flaws that it's hard to appreciate those good points where they lie. Everything about the sculpt really does capture the spirit and essence of Grimlock to a degree where it could almost redeem itself on that alone and can do just that to the right person. I was struggling for a while to figure out the right way to convey the size of the figures I review. As most toy reviewers seem to have tiny hands, I tend to come away from the reviews with the impression that the figures are much bigger than they actually are, and my hands would doubtlessly lead to problems of their own because I have massive spider hands! So I knew I needed to use some universal object that everyone has for comparison's sake. But what is a universally sized object that everyone has? Phones, monitors, microwaves, they all go up and down in size. Then it hit me. The one thing everyone is guaranteed to have, no matter how poor or how rich. The VHS copy of the original 1986 Transformers movie. What? That's not good enough for you? Fine, I'll find something else. Ingrates. How about the 30th anniversary DVD re-release? And for one last Grimlock flavored item for size comparison, the Blu-ray box for Transformers Devastation. There, between those three formats, you should have something to illustrate the size of this guy. To be perfectly honest, when I first got him in hand, I was expecting him to be bigger, not by a lot, but like 10% bigger than he actually is. I know I said I wasn't really going to talk about his Dino Mode posability, but there is one thing worth discussing with that. Due to another gimmick of this toy, his neck joint in the Dino Mode is utter crap. Wobbly, couldn't hold a pose to save the designer's life. It's on this weird crank joint that's supposed to cause the head to turn when you waggle Grimlock's butt for him. Now there's a sentence. Problem is, it doesn't really work. At all. So we lost a decent neck joint for nothing. Hooray. One thing that could have pushed the Dino Mode over the top into something special would have been the ability to tilt the head, not just theoretically be able to turn it at the base of the neck like we got. Give him some of that action there. There are several ways they could have done it too, but no, this toy has to sacrifice everything in the name of stupid gimmicks. To sum up, the positive qualities or pros of this toy in order are the head sculpt, the chromed two-color eyes, the sculpt and silhouette of the whole figure in general, and the transformation is okay. There are some masterpiece figures out there with 10-minute long transformations that leave you scratching your head how to complete them every single time, and this isn't one of them. And the flaws, or cons, the toy loyalty. It ruins everything. The posability is weak at best because of the toy loyalty. The tolerances and the quality of the toy are all over the place, leading to some joints not being capable of holding a pose, while other joints feel to be at legitimate threat of snapping off. And the handling. The lack of posability, coupled with the poor tolerances, coupled with the fact that he constantly wants to fall in half, makes handling this figure so much more of a chore than it should be. As I alluded to earlier, the look of this toy alone is enough to sell it to the right buyer. If you are a huge Grimlock fanboy like me, this toy is an easy sell. It's ultimately going to be disappointing on all other fronts, but if you absolutely need something that looks like Grimlock, accept no substitutes. Until Giga Power comes up with their Grimlock alike. For all others, this rates a bit further down on the list. The toy isn't a complete abortion like some other figures, and while not something I think you need to buy, I can't say you'd hate your purchase. I really debated on whether or not to give this toy a better rating, but honestly, I saw it on sale online for 10 bucks less than I bought it for, and I thought how much nicer it would have been to have gotten it for that price. So this toy would have definitely been better for less. Don't buy it for more than $80. That's what I paid for it, and I just barely don't feel cheated.